Bam! Boom! Welcome, welcome, welcome to yet another stimulating set of notes from me to you. This time it's on the cell. Introduction to the cell. Some important people we're going to talk about here. Make sure you get them down and get what they did. So here we go. Let's talk about the first person today called Robert Hooke. You'll notice the date says 1665. I'm not that concerned you know the dates. If you know it's around 1600, you're fine. Okay, so what did Robert Hooke do? All right, what's he important for? He used a microscope to examine cork. In fact, he was the first one to see cells. In fact, he came up with the term cell. And he named them cells because he thought that the little boxes he was looking at, because cork was a plant cell, so they looked square, he thought they looked like the cells monks lived in. Therefore, he gave them the term cell. That's why we have this term cell today, which you may not have known. Then we come to this guy, Anton van Leeuwenhoek. All right, so what did he do? He was the first to view living cells under a microscope. So Hooke saw dead cork cells. Hold on a sec. Dog's got to be let out. Hold on. He used a homemade, simple one-lens microscope that looks something like this down here. Kind of looks like a paddle, where you got the sample holder here, the lenses here, the focus knob, a couple of twists and a magnification portion, and he thought he had his first microscope. All right, that's what Leeuwenhoek was responsible for. Pretty smart dude. All right, that brings us to this guy named Schleiden. Okay, Schleiden helped with the cell theory. He was a botanist, which means studied plants. He concluded that all plants are composed of cells. Important because no one knew anything about cells back then. This is Mr. Schwann. So we had Schleiden and we have Schwann. Schwann is a zoologist, which means studied animals. And guess what he came up with? That's right. He concluded that all animals are composed of cells. So we've got the previous scientist who said all plants are composed of cells, and we've got this guy that says all animals are composed of cells. What might you think is next? This person's name is Mr. Virchow, and to me, he is the most fascinating one of them all. He was a physician, a pathologist, and a biologist. A doctor, someone who studies dangerous things in the body, and a biologist. So I think that's pretty impressive. Concluded that all cells come from other cells. So now we've got all plants are cells, all animals are cells, and the only way you can get cells is to come from another cell. This was revolutionary in the 1800s. And this leads us to the cell theory. Research by scientists such as Schleiden, Schwann, and Virchow led to the development of the cell theory. It consists of three basic principles. They are, number one, all living things are composed of one or more cells. Anything that's alive has cells. 2. Cells are the basic unit of structure and function. And 3. Cells come only from the reproduction of existing cells, meaning cells come from other cells only. So why are cells so small? They lack a circulatory system. They don't have the stuff we do. They don't have veins, they don't have arteries, anything like that. So they got to be able to transfer nutrients through their cell membrane. That relies on something called diffusion. That allows materials to go back and forth. It's a slow process. They got to be small in order for that to go across the membrane. So what you want to write down here is you want to write down the first part. They lack the circulatory system and they rely on diffusion and it being slow. It's why they're small. This enables the cell to maintain homeostasis. Remember, a dynamic state of equilibrium. All right, now to cell structure. Cells are organized with specialized parts. These parts are structures called organelles, each which performs specific functions for the cell. You all know the mitochondria and you all know the definition. You think you know the definition, but it is not allowed what you are thinking. It is not the powerhouse of the cell. You are not allowed to say that anymore. That is an elementary school definition. We will soon explore the specialized parts and functions of the cell when we return from break. You may be able to see some of these, but here's a review of some of the organelles. Endoplasmic reticulum, or ER, cell membrane, nucleus, ribosome, lysosome, mitochondria, and Golgi apparatus, or Golgi complex. There are tons and tons and billions of different kinds of cells in the world, but they all have at least 3 things in common. This is a great open-ended question and something you need to remember. They all have 1, a cell membrane. 2, genetic material, DNA, which stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. And 3, they all have cytoplasm. Here are some various shapes that you can see cells in. You got red blood cells that are over here. That's not the best picture. They should look like this one right here, the concave one. All right, you got muscle cells with little striations in there. You got a nerve cell. That's what they look like. There are 2 major types of cells. One is eukaryotic. Now, we already did this. Eukaryotes contain a membrane-bound nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. So, has a nucleus. You can see it right here. Has a nucleus. It's a eukaryote. What's the opposite of eukaryotic? You said it. Prokaryotic. Prokaryotic cells do not contain a membrane-bound nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. Here's a prokaryote. You see it's got ribosomes, it's got cell membrane, it might have a cell wall, it's definitely got cytoplasm, it has DNA, it's got all the things we discussed, but it does not have a nucleus or membrane-bound organelles. Quiz time, question 1. Name the 3 scientists who contributed to cell theory or discoveries related to the cell. Discoveries related to the cell, the first 3 we talked about. Figure out who they are. Question 2. Why are most cells so small? We went over that. You got to be able to answer these. I'm going to go over these answers when you come back into class. 3. What 3 basic parts do all cells have? 4. What type of cells do you have? And 5. What would happen if the cell was too large? Write these answers down, and whether we come back in now or we come back in a different day to discuss them at the beginning of the class, I want to go over these answers. Bam! Make sure you have them down. Nice job. Talk to you soon.